The judge's niece refused every suitor in town, until a dusty cowboy asked for one dance. The town of Willow Creek was small but lively, nestled in a quiet valley, surrounded by rolling hills and fields of golden wheat. The sun shone warmly over the streets, casting long shadows from the wooden porches and brick buildings. Horses clopped along the main road, carts creaked under the weight of supplies, and children's laughter echoed near the riverbanks. Among the townsfolk, one figure always stood out, not for loudness, but for a quiet presence that everyone noticed: Clara Whitmore, the niece of Judge Whitmore. Clara was unlike any young woman in the town. She had a calm strength in her eyes and a smile that could light up even the dullest day. Her hair fell in waves that caught the sun, and her posture always reflected dignity and self-respect. Yet more than her appearance, it was her mind that fascinated the people. She read books that spoke of lands far beyond Willow Creek, of adventures she might never take but imagined vividly. She questioned things politely but firmly, never afraid to voice an opinion, even if it went against the expectations of others. From an early age, Clara had understood one simple truth: she valued her freedom above all else. Many young women in the town dreamed of marriage as a goal, of settling down in comfortable homes, of raising children under the gentle guidance of their husbands. But Clara saw life differently. She wanted to explore ideas, to learn about the world, and to make choices for herself rather than follow the path laid out for her. And because of this, she had earned a reputation. Every suitor who came to court her left disappointed. It was not that Clara was unkind or cold. On the contrary, she treated everyone with warmth and respect. She would smile, offer tea, and converse gracefully with any visitor. But when the conversation turned toward proposals of marriage, she would always respond with gentle refusal. "I am honored by your attention," she would say, "but I am not ready to marry anyone, nor do I wish to be tied to a life I have not chosen for myself." These words, delivered politely yet firmly, had become famous across the town. People whispered about her independence in hushed tones at the market, at church, and even in the courthouse where her uncle presided. Judge Whitmore was a man of principle and fairness. He loved his niece deeply and respected her intelligence. He saw the determination in her and understood her desire to choose her own path. Yet, even he sometimes worried. He feared that, in a world where women often relied on men for security, Clara's independent spirit might leave her vulnerable or lonely. Despite these concerns, he never tried to force her into a marriage or interfere in her choices. He knew that her strength of character would serve her well in life, even if the townspeople found it unusual. Clara's daily life was a mixture of routine and adventure. Mornings often began with walks to the river, where she would collect wildflowers or watch the ducks glide across the water. She loved the sound of flowing water, the rustling leaves, and the gentle songs of birds. Sometimes she wrote letters to friends in distant towns, sharing her thoughts about books she had read or sketches she had made of the landscapes. On other days, she helped her uncle in the courthouse, organizing documents, observing trials, and learning about the law. She was a keen observer, absorbing knowledge like a sponge, and her uncle often relied on her insights when complicated matters arose. Despite her busy life, the townsfolk never ceased their attempts to win her affection. There were merchants who brought gifts of fine fabrics or jewelry, farmers who offered the best produce from their fields, and young men from neighboring towns who rode long distances to speak with her. Each arrival was met with Clara's characteristic poise and courteous conversation. She listened to their stories, laughed at their jokes, and engaged in lively debates about literature, music, or politics. But when the time came to answer their proposals, she remained steadfast in her refusal. One such suitor, Thomas Hargrave, was the son of a wealthy landowner. He had come to Willow Creek with a grand plan to marry Clara, imagining a life of comfort and admiration. He presented her with flowers, chocolates, and promises of a secure future. Yet Clara responded as she always did: "Your kindness is appreciated, Thomas, but my heart is not ready for such a commitment." Thomas left, frustrated but impressed by her conviction. The story of his visit spread quickly, adding yet another chapter to the legend of the judge's niece who would not be tamed. Even during town events, Clara's independence shone. At the annual harvest festival, when young men would gather to impress the ladies with dancing and songs, Clara participated fully, but always on her own terms. She danced with friends, laughed freely, and engaged in games, never allowing anyone to sway her toward romance. People admired her confidence and grace, but they also whispered that no man could ever hope to capture her heart. It was as if she existed in a world slightly apart from the rest of Willow Creek, one where her choices belonged solely to her. Clara also spent a great deal of time learning practical skills, much to the surprise of many townsfolk. She learned to sew not just for appearance but for usefulness, tended to a small garden behind her uncle's house, and mastered the art of horseback riding along the hills surrounding the town. These activities gave her a sense of independence that went beyond the mind. She felt capable, strong, and self-reliant. While other young women in Willow Creek prepared for a life largely within the confines of home, Clara prepared for life itself, with all its possibilities and uncertainties. Her reputation was not without challenges. Some townspeople criticized her, believing that a woman should be more compliant and less ambitious. Others were envious, unable to understand her refusal to follow the traditional path. But Clara never let gossip affect her. She understood that true confidence came from knowing oneself and acting with integrity. She treated criticism with calm dignity, responding only when necessary and always with kindness. Over time, even those who initially disapproved came to admire her, recognizing that her strength did not make her unkind. It made her remarkable. In quieter moments, Clara sometimes felt the weight of solitude. She would watch couples strolling along the streets, hand in hand, and wonder if she would ever find someone who understood her spirit. But she never rushed her heart or compromised her values. She believed that companionship, if it came, would be something natural, honest, and unforced. Until that day arrived, she found joy in learning, in nature, in the company of friends, and in the simple pleasures of life. Her uncle often reminded her of the value of patience. "Clara," he said one afternoon as they walked along the courthouse steps, "the world may pressure you to act in a certain way, but you have always been wise beyond your years. Trust that the right opportunities will come when the time is right." Clara nodded, appreciating his guidance while remaining confident in her own choices. As the sun dipped behind the hills, casting golden light across Willow Creek, Clara often paused to look at the horizon. She imagined the stories unfolding in distant lands, the adventures she had yet to experience, and the people she had yet to meet. She felt a sense of anticipation, a quiet excitement that life could always surprise her, and in that anticipation she found contentment. It was this mixture of curiosity, independence, and quiet strength that made Clara Whitmore so unforgettable to the people of Willow Creek. They spoke of her with admiration and fascination, always wondering who, if anyone, could ever win her heart. But Clara knew her own mind and heart better than anyone else, and that knowledge gave her freedom and confidence. She had no intention of changing herself to satisfy others, no matter how persistent or wealthy a suitor might be. And so life in Willow Creek continued, with Clara moving through the town like a gentle but unyielding force. Children would wave, merchants would greet her politely, and neighbors would nod with respect. She walked with purpose, smiled with warmth, and spoke with intelligence. She was the judge's niece, yes, but more importantly, she was herself, entirely and unapologetically. Little did the townspeople know, life had plans for Clara that no one could have imagined. Someone would arrive in Willow Creek, unlike any suitor she had ever met, someone whose presence would spark curiosity in her heart and perhaps challenge even her steadfast independence. But that was a story for another day. For now, Clara Whitmore remained a figure of grace, intelligence, and unwavering self-respect. A young woman living life on her own terms, admired and remembered by all who knew her. The years passed in Willow Creek, and Clara Whitmore's reputation as the independent, untouchable niece of Judge Whitmore only grew stronger. Every young man who came to the town learned quickly of her grace, intelligence, and firm resolve. Yet despite all the whispers, she remained unfazed, continuing her life with a quiet confidence that both intrigued and puzzled the townspeople. Every season brought new faces to Willow Creek. Some were travelers passing through on dusty roads. Others were young men hoping to make their mark in the world and perhaps win Clara's attention. They would arrive at the courthouse or knock on her uncle's front door, flowers in hand, hearts full of hope. And without fail, they left with the same polite refusal. The pattern had become almost predictable, yet the curiosity surrounding her only deepened with each rejection. Among the most notable suitors was a young man named Leonard Harper, a prosperous merchant who had recently moved from a neighboring town. Leonard was confident, well-spoken, and determined to win Clara's heart. He arrived with letters of admiration, gifts of silk and lace, and tales of his travels that he hoped would impress her. Clara received him graciously, listening politely as he described the city markets, the bustling streets, and the grand homes he intended to build one day. But when Leonard finally asked for her hand in marriage, Clara gently shook her head. "I am honored by your offer, Leonard," she said, "but my path is my own, and I cannot take a step I am not ready for." Leonard left with a mixture of frustration and awe, realizing that this was no ordinary young woman. Then came Samuel Greer, a young farmer whose family had lived in Willow Creek for generations. Samuel was quiet, kind, and hardworking, qualities many believed would appeal to Clara. He brought her fresh flowers from his fields, homemade bread, and promises of a simple, comfortable life together. Yet Clara, appreciating his sincerity, still refused. "I value your kindness, Samuel," she told him, "but I must first discover the world for myself before I can consider a life with another." Samuel respected her decision, though his friends teased him about chasing a girl who seemed impossible to win. It was not only men from Willow Creek who sought her hand. News of Clara's beauty and intelligence traveled to nearby towns, and young gentlemen traveled long distances hoping to meet her. Some came with extravagant gifts, others with charming words, but all met the same fate: Clara's firm and polite refusal. Each incident became a story shared among townsfolk, whispered in the marketplace or over tea at social gatherings. "The judge's niece has turned down another suitor," they would say with both admiration and frustration. Despite these challenges, Clara remained unshaken. She enjoyed her independence and valued her ability to make decisions for herself. Her days were filled with a mixture of responsibilities and pleasures. She helped her uncle in the courthouse, learning about the law, observing trials, and assisting in organizing records. She loved this work because it allowed her to understand people, witness justice, and feel that she was contributing meaningfully to her community. The townspeople sometimes marveled at her knowledge of legal matters, noting that few women of her age and background had such experience. Outside the courthouse, Clara spent time in nature. She wandered along the river, skimming stones across the water and observing the birds and fish. She tended to a small garden behind her uncle's home, cultivating flowers and vegetables with patience and care. She rode her horse across the rolling hills, feeling the wind on her face and the freedom of the open fields. These activities were not only enjoyable but also empowering, giving her a sense of independence that few women in Willow Creek experienced. The social life of the town also provided opportunities for Clara to interact with suitors, though always on her own terms. The annual Harvest Festival was one such event, a time when townspeople gathered to celebrate the season with music, dancing, and games. Young men would compete for the attention of the women, showing off their strength, skill, or charm. Clara participated fully in the festivities, enjoying the music and laughter, but she never allowed herself to be pressured or drawn into romance. She danced with friends, cheered for children in races, and admired the colorful decorations that filled the town square. One autumn evening, the festival was in full swing. Lanterns were hung along the main street, casting a warm glow over the crowd. Musicians played cheerful tunes on fiddles and drums, while townsfolk sang along or clapped to the rhythm. Clara moved gracefully among the dancers, exchanging smiles and polite greetings. Several young men approached her with invitations to dance, each one hoping to capture her attention. She accepted with courtesy, but she never lingered longer than necessary. Her movements were confident and elegant, demonstrating both her skill and her control over her own choices. Among the attendees was a young man named Henry Latham, a schoolteacher from a nearby town. Henry admired Clara greatly and had written her letters expressing his admiration for her intellect and charm. That evening, he approached her with a bouquet of wildflowers and a nervous smile. "Would you honor me with a dance, Miss Whitmore?" he asked. Clara accepted, and for a moment they moved in perfect harmony to the music. But when Henry attempted to steer the conversation toward a proposal of marriage, Clara gently excused herself. She thanked him for the dance and wished him a pleasant evening, leaving him with a mixture of admiration and disappointment. Clara's independence was not without consequences. Some townspeople criticized her, believing that a woman should be more compliant and less ambitious. Others envied her, unable to understand why she refused to follow the traditional path of marriage. There were even those who whispered that she might regret her choices later in life. But Clara paid little attention to gossip. She understood that her life was hers to live, and that true happiness came from acting with integrity and staying true to oneself. In her private moments, Clara sometimes wondered if she would ever find someone who shared her values and respected her independence. She watched couples stroll through the town, hand in hand, and imagined what it might be like to have a companion who truly understood her. But she refused to compromise her principles or rush her heart. She believed that if such a person existed, their connection would be natural, honest, and unforced. Until that day arrived, she focused on learning, exploring, and enjoying the life she had chosen. Judge Whitmore often offered her guidance during these reflective moments. "Clara," he said one afternoon as they walked through the courthouse gardens, "many will try to shape your choices, but remember that your judgment is wise. The right person will come along in time, and when they do, you will know. Until then, live fully and fearlessly." Clara appreciated his advice, nodding in agreement, yet she remained confident in her own decisions. She did not need to be hurried or persuaded. She knew that life would unfold as it should. Clara's friends also played an important role in her life. They admired her independence and shared her curiosity about the world. Together, they would explore the surrounding hills, visit the river, or read books beneath the shade of old oak trees. These friendships were a source of joy and support, offering laughter, conversation, and companionship without the pressures of romance. Through these bonds, Clara learned the importance of mutual respect, trust, and shared interests, qualities she valued deeply in any relationship. As the seasons changed, the pattern of suitors arriving and leaving continued. Each new young man who came to Willow Creek added to the legend of Clara Whitmore, the judge's niece who refused to be confined by tradition. Some left impressed by her intelligence, others frustrated by her refusal, and a few simply awed by her unwavering sense of self. Through it all, Clara remained steady, her heart open but cautious, her spirit free yet grounded. Despite the attention she received, Clara found fulfillment in her everyday life. She reveled in the small joys, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, the laughter of children playing in the streets, the golden light of sunset over the hills. She explored books and letters from distant places, imagining adventures she might one day take. She tended her garden and cared for animals, learning lessons in patience and responsibility. And she continued to assist her uncle, gaining knowledge and wisdom that would serve her for years to come. Through all these experiences, Clara's independence became her defining quality. It was not rebellion or stubbornness, but a quiet confidence in knowing her own worth. She had learned that life offered many paths, and that the right choice was the one that aligned with her values, not the expectations of others. In this way, she inspired those around her, showing that a person could live fully, act with integrity, and still be admired and respected. As another harvest festival approached, the townspeople once again speculated about who might finally win Clara's heart. Yet she remained unfazed by their curiosity. She moved through her life with grace, enjoying the music, the laughter, and the simple pleasures of Willow Creek. Little did anyone know, a stranger would soon arrive, unlike any suitor she had met before. A dusty cowboy with a quiet confidence that would stir curiosity and awaken feelings she had never experienced. But that story was yet to unfold. For now, Clara Whitmore continued her life as she always had, independent, thoughtful, and full of quiet joy. She walked through Willow Creek with a purpose, greeted friends and neighbors with warmth, and carried herself with a dignity that left an impression on everyone she met. She was the judge's niece. Yes, but more than that, she was a young woman discovering the world on her own terms, steadfast in her beliefs, and open to whatever adventures life might bring. It was a late summer evening in Willow Creek, and the town was alive with anticipation for the annual harvest ball. The streets were decorated with lanterns that flickered in the warm breeze, casting a soft glow on the cobblestone paths. The air carried the scent of fresh bread, sweet pies, and the faint aroma of wildflowers from the hills nearby. Children ran through the streets laughing, while adults bustled about, preparing for the celebration with excitement in their eyes. Among them was Clara Whitmore, dressed in a simple yet elegant gown, her hair pinned carefully and her eyes bright with curiosity. Clara had attended many harvest balls before, but she approached each one with a mixture of enjoyment and detachment. She loved the music, the laughter, and the feeling of community, but she never allowed herself to become the center of attention for the wrong reasons. Suitors had come and gone in the past, hoping for her hand in marriage, yet she had remained polite but resolute in her refusals. Tonight she was determined to enjoy the evening on her own terms, free from expectation, savoring the music and the conversations without the pressure of suitors. The grand hall was filled with townspeople, friends, and familiar faces. Musicians played lively tunes on fiddles and flutes, while couples danced in pairs, spinning and stepping in perfect harmony. Clara moved gracefully among the dancers, exchanging polite greetings and enjoying the cheerful atmosphere. She smiled at the familiar faces, chatting with friends and listening to stories of the season's harvest, but she carefully avoided any conversation that might lead to proposals. Her heart was free, and she intended to keep it that way, for now. As the night grew warmer, the doors of the hall opened, and a stranger entered the room. He was unlike anyone Clara had seen in Willow Creek before. Dressed in worn but tidy clothes, his hat dusty from travel and boots that had clearly seen long roads, he carried an air of quiet confidence. His eyes, dark and steady, scanned the room with curiosity, but there was no arrogance in his gaze, only calm determination. He was Samuel McCall, though most in the room would soon know him as Dusty, a traveling cowboy who had spent months on the plains, moving cattle and exploring distant lands. Dusty's presence immediately caught the attention of the townsfolk. His rugged appearance and gentle manner stood out in contrast to the polished young men who had come seeking Clara in the past. He walked with a slow, deliberate grace, nodding politely to those he passed, and then, without hesitation, approached Clara. The room seemed to hush slightly as he came closer, and Clara felt a small flutter of curiosity in her chest. "Miss Whitmore," Dusty said, tipping his hat with a charming smile, "may I have the honor of one dance?" The simplicity of his request caught Clara off guard. Unlike other suitors, he did not bring gifts, flattery, or promises of wealth. He asked for only one dance, and he asked with genuine respect and quiet confidence. Clara considered his request for a moment, sensing the honesty in his eyes. Something about him was different, something that intrigued her and stirred her curiosity. She nodded, accepting his invitation with a gentle smile. As they stepped onto the dance floor, Clara found herself captivated not only by Dusty's calm presence, but also by the way he moved. There was a natural rhythm to his steps, a quiet strength that matched her own sense of independence. The music swelled around them, lively and cheerful, and yet there was a peacefulness in the way Dusty guided her through the dance. He did not try to impress her with grand gestures or words. He simply shared the moment with her, allowing her to feel comfortable and at ease. As they danced, Dusty began to speak, his voice soft and steady. He told her about the wide-open plains he had traveled, the long days spent riding under the sun, and the quiet nights under a sky filled with stars. Clara listened intently, fascinated by the images he painted with his words. She had always imagined faraway lands, but hearing about them from someone who had actually lived those experiences brought them vividly to life. She found herself asking questions, genuinely curious, and Dusty answered with patience and sincerity, never rushing or boasting. For the first time, Clara realized that someone could be interested in her without trying to control or impress her. Dusty's respect for her independence was clear in every word and every movement. She did not feel pressure to respond in a particular way or to meet anyone else's expectations. Instead, she felt a sense of freedom she had rarely experienced in the presence of a man. There was no need to act or perform. She could simply be herself. The townspeople watched with fascination as Clara danced with the Dusty cowboy. Some whispered in surprise, noting the stark difference between Dusty and the polished young men who had come seeking her hand in the past. Others smiled quietly, sensing that something unique was happening, something beyond the ordinary patterns of courtship they had grown accustomed to. Clara, however, remained focused on the moment, her mind engaged with Dusty's stories and her heart quietly opening to the possibility of connection. As the music continued, they moved through conversations that ranged from playful to thoughtful. Dusty spoke of his experiences on the trails, the challenges of cattle drives, and the beauty of the natural world he had explored. Clara shared her thoughts on books she had read, the changing seasons in Willow Creek, and her love for learning and discovery. They found common ground in their appreciation for independence and curiosity, recognizing in each other a kindred spirit who valued honesty and respect above all else. The dance ended too quickly, though neither wanted to break the connection they had begun to form. Dusty offered a polite bow, and Clara curtsied in response, both smiling with genuine warmth. The brief moment of contact had opened a door, hinting at possibilities neither had anticipated. For Clara, it was the first time in many years that a suitor had sparked genuine interest and curiosity, rather than polite obligation or societal expectation. For Dusty, it was the first time he had encountered someone whose spirit matched his own, someone who valued freedom as much as he did. After the dance, they moved to a quieter corner of the hall to continue their conversation. Dusty spoke of his dreams, not of wealth or status, but of meaningful experiences and adventures that allowed him to grow and learn. Clara shared her thoughts on independence, the joys and challenges of living life on one's own terms, and the satisfaction she found in pursuing knowledge and curiosity. They laughed, exchanged ideas, and found comfort in each other's company, recognizing that a connection could be formed without pressure, expectation, or obligation. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of music, laughter, and celebration. Yet Clara found her attention repeatedly drawn back to Dusty. She noticed the way he listened carefully, the quiet confidence in his movements, and the honesty in his gaze. It was a different kind of attention than she had experienced before, one that felt safe, respectful, and invigorating. In Dusty, she saw a potential partner who could walk alongside her without trying to change her, someone whose presence complemented rather than confined her spirit. By the end of the night, whispers filled the hall. Townspeople speculated quietly about the unusual partnership forming between Clara and the dusty cowboy. Some were skeptical, having grown accustomed to the traditional suitors who sought her hand. Others felt a quiet hope, sensing that Clara had found someone worthy of her independence and intelligence. Clara herself felt a mixture of excitement and calm, curious about the possibilities that lay ahead, but content to move forward at her own pace. As the lanterns flickered and the music slowed, Clara and Dusty stepped outside to the cool evening air. The stars sparkled above, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves in the trees. For a moment, they simply stood together, enjoying the quiet peace of the night. Dusty removed his hat, brushing a lock of dusty hair from his forehead, and smiled. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Whitmore," he said softly. "It was an honor." Clara returned his smile, feeling a warmth she had not expected. "The pleasure was mine, Mr. McCall," she replied. "You have a way of making even one dance feel like an adventure." That single dance marked the beginning of a subtle, unfolding story. Neither Clara nor Dusty rushed toward a declaration of love or commitment. Instead, they began to learn about each other gradually, discovering shared values, mutual respect, and a quiet admiration for the freedom each held dear. The townspeople, accustomed to the pattern of suitors arriving and departing, began to notice the difference in this new connection, a partnership built not on expectation, but on curiosity, honesty, and understanding. In the days that followed, Clara found herself thinking about Dusty more often than she expected. She remembered the way he had listened, the stories he had shared, and the calm confidence that had accompanied every word and gesture. She realized that her heart, which had remained guarded for so many years, was stirring with interest, not from pressure or obligation, but from genuine admiration and curiosity. For the first time, she wondered if she had met someone who could match her spirit, someone who could walk beside her without diminishing her independence. Dusty, too, found himself reflecting on the dance and the brief conversation that had followed. He admired Clara's intelligence, her wit, and her unwavering sense of self. Unlike the women he had met in his travels, she did not seek to control him, nor did she expect him to conform to a particular role. Instead, she offered respect, conversation, and honesty, qualities he valued above all else. He felt a quiet hope that this connection might grow, built on understanding rather than expectation. And so, the town of Willow Creek continued its rhythm of daily life, with Clara and Dusty beginning a unique chapter that defied the usual patterns of courtship. Their story was not one of hurried romance or shallow attraction, but of two independent spirits recognizing each other, sharing moments of conversation, and discovering the possibility of companionship that complemented rather than confined. It was a beginning filled with curiosity, respect, and the quiet promise of something extraordinary. After that first dance at the Harvest Ball, life in Willow Creek began to feel different for Clara Whitmore. The town continued its usual rhythm of work, trade, and social events, yet there was a new anticipation in the air. Clara often found herself thinking about Dusty McCall, the dusty cowboy who had entered her life with nothing more than a polite request for a dance. Unlike the many suitors who had come before, he had not tried to impress her with wealth, gifts, or grand promises. Instead, he had shown respect, patience, and honesty, qualities that spoke to her in a way no one else ever had. Clara and Dusty began spending more time together, though neither rushed into anything. Their meetings were simple: walks along the river, conversations beneath the old oak trees, and quiet rides along the hills that surrounded the town. Dusty shared stories of his travels, of wide plains, star-filled nights, and long rides across the countryside. Clara shared her love of books, her observations of town life, and her thoughts on independence and self-discovery. With each meeting, they found a growing respect and admiration for one another. The townspeople noticed the difference immediately. In the past, suitors came to Clara with urgency, seeking to win her hand as quickly as possible. They often flaunted wealth or tried to impress her with clever words. Dusty, however, was different. He moved at his own pace, never imposing, never demanding. The town whispered with curiosity and sometimes skepticism about this unusual partnership. "The dusty cowboy seems patient and honest," some said, "but will Clara truly open her heart to him?" Others smiled quietly, hoping that perhaps she had finally met someone who matched her spirit. Clara's uncle, Judge Whitmore, observed the growing friendship with approval. He had always worried that someone might try to control or pressure his niece, but he sensed that Dusty treated her with genuine respect. One evening, as they walked together through the courthouse garden, he said, "Clara, it seems you have found someone who understands the value of freedom and respect. Take your time, but do not be afraid to let your heart recognize what it already knows." Clara nodded, appreciating his guidance while remaining confident in her own judgment. As the weeks turned into months, Clara and Dusty's bond deepened. They explored the countryside together, learning from each other and discovering shared joys in simple pleasures. Dusty showed Clara the art of riding long distances across open fields, teaching her how to feel the rhythm of the horse beneath her and the wind against her face. Clara introduced Dusty to her love of books, sharing stories of distant lands and exciting adventures. In each other's company, they discovered a companionship built not on obligation, but on curiosity, trust, and mutual admiration. The quiet moments they shared were often the most meaningful. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Dusty and Clara sat together by the river. The sky was painted with shades of orange, pink, and gold, reflecting on the water in a dazzling display. Dusty spoke softly of the stars he had seen in distant places, the stillness of the plains, and the lessons he had learned from life on the trails. Clara listened, captivated, sharing her own thoughts on freedom, responsibility, and the importance of living a life true to oneself. In that peaceful moment, they felt a connection that went beyond words, a recognition of shared values and a respect for each other's spirit. Despite their growing closeness, Clara remained cautious. She had spent years valuing her independence, and she was not about to abandon it lightly. Dusty understood this completely, never pushing her or trying to sway her feelings. He admired her strength, her intelligence, and her resolve. In his eyes, her independence was not a challenge to be overcome, but a quality to be respected and cherished. This understanding only strengthened Clara's trust and affection for him. As their friendship continued, Dusty became a familiar presence in Willow Creek. He helped where he could, assisting farmers during harvests, mending fences, or sharing knowledge of the land. His quiet kindness and reliability earned him the respect of the townspeople, who began to see that he was not just a stranger passing through, but someone who genuinely cared for the community and for Clara. Slowly, skepticism turned into admiration, and whispers of doubt were replaced with quiet approval. Clara, too, began to recognize the unique qualities in Dusty. He was not wealthy, nor did he seek to impress with grand gestures, yet he offered something far more valuable: honesty, patience, and a partnership based on mutual respect. She realized that love did not have to mean losing her independence, and that companionship could be found without compromise or obligation. For the first time, she felt a sense of peace about the future, knowing that someone had entered her life who truly understood her heart. Their relationship grew naturally, marked by shared experiences rather than dramatic declarations. They spent time riding across hills at dawn, watching the mist rise from the valleys. They picnicked by the river, sharing stories and laughter as the water flowed gently past. They helped neighbors with small tasks, laughed with children, and attended town gatherings together, always side by side yet allowing each other the space to be themselves. In every action, they demonstrated a partnership that complemented, rather than confined, each other. One day, as they walked through the market square, a young woman approached Clara with a smile. "I have never seen someone so gentle and patient with you," she said. "You seem happy, truly happy." Clara smiled, realizing that the townspeople were beginning to notice the change in her demeanor. She felt a sense of contentment she had not known before, a calm, steady happiness that came from being understood and respected. Dusty, standing beside her, gave a quiet nod, understanding that the connection they shared was based on trust and admiration, not expectation. The seasons continued to change, bringing new colors, scents, and experiences to Willow Creek. Clara and Dusty adapted to the rhythm of life, finding joy in ordinary moments and delight in shared adventures. They attended harvest festivals, helped during planting seasons, and explored the hills and rivers that surrounded the town. In every activity, they supported each other, celebrated each other's strengths, and learned from each other's perspectives. Their companionship became a model for others, demonstrating that love could coexist with independence, and that mutual respect formed the foundation of a lasting relationship. As time passed, the bond between Clara and Dusty became undeniable. The townspeople, once skeptical, began to see the strength of their connection. Families spoke with admiration of how the cowboy had earned Clara's trust, not through grand gestures or material offerings, but through honesty, patience, and genuine understanding. Friends noted how Clara seemed more relaxed, more joyful, and more alive in the presence of someone who truly valued her for who she was. Clara herself felt a deep sense of gratitude and contentment. She had spent years guarding her heart, valuing her independence, and refusing to compromise her principles. Now, she realized that someone had entered her life who enhanced her freedom rather than restricted it. Dusty's presence did not demand change or submission. It offered partnership, companionship, and the quiet joy of being seen and understood. In him, she found a reflection of her own values, a kindred spirit who shared her respect for honesty, independence, and the simple pleasures of life. One autumn evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky was painted with golden light, Clara and Dusty walked along the riverbank. The air was cool, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant wildflowers. They paused on a small wooden bridge, looking at the reflection of the sky and the water below. Dusty turned to Clara, his voice soft and steady. "Clara," he said, "these months have shown me that life is richer when shared with someone who understands and respects you. I do not wish to change you, only to walk beside you." Clara looked into his eyes, seeing the sincerity and warmth there. "And I have learned," she replied, "that companionship does not mean giving up freedom, but finding someone whose presence makes life fuller and brighter." In that moment, they understood that their journey together was not about losing themselves in each other, but about enhancing and complementing one another's lives. The town of Willow Creek, once skeptical of any man who might win Clara's heart, now observed the pair with quiet admiration. They saw a relationship built not on tradition or expectation, but on respect, understanding, and shared values. Clara's independence remained intact, yet she experienced a sense of joy and fulfillment she had never known. Dusty's steady presence complemented her spirit, creating a partnership that was rare and inspiring. Over time, Clara and Dusty became inseparable companions. They faced challenges together, celebrated successes, and enjoyed quiet, ordinary moments that held extraordinary meaning. Their connection was not built on spectacle, but on the small, consistent acts of respect, patience, and honesty. In each other, they had found a partnership that allowed them both to grow, to explore, and to experience life fully, without compromise or obligation. By the following spring, the townspeople began to speak openly about Clara and Dusty's bond. Children played near their favorite meeting spots. Adults smiled knowingly as they passed, and even the most skeptical neighbors admitted that this was a partnership unlike any they had witnessed before. Clara's uncle, Judge Whitmore, looked on with pride and quiet satisfaction, seeing that his niece had found someone who valued her as much as he did, someone whose presence enhanced rather than restricted her life. In the end, Clara Whitmore discovered a truth she had always hoped for but never taken for granted. Love did not require surrendering independence, and companionship could be found without compromise. Dusty McCall had entered her life quietly, asking only for one dance, yet he had shown her the possibility of partnership rooted in respect, honesty, and shared joy. Together they walked through Willow Creek and beyond, side by side, hearts aligned yet free, ready to face whatever adventures awaited them with courage, curiosity, and unwavering trust.